Welcome to Empathy Stories, where we explore heartfelt tales that inspire, connect, and remind us of the profound power of love and resilience. Today, we delve into the incredible journey of Kelly, who turned a seemingly modest inheritance from her late father into a legacy that united her family and transformed her community. Kelly Davis sat in the quiet living room of her childhood home in Greenville, South Carolina, the scent of freshly brewed coffee mingling with the faint mustiness of old memories. Her mother, Margaret, had taken up a seat by the window, her hands folded neatly in her lap, though her gaze seemed lost beyond the suburban street. It had been only a few weeks since James Davis, Kelly's father, had passed, and the weight of his absence filled every corner of the house. For Kelly, the grief felt raw, intensified by unresolved regrets. Kelly's mind wandered back to the day of her wedding. 5 years earlier, her father had held her hands tightly, his weathered face radiating pride as they stood together beneath the glowing lights of the reception hall. "Kelly," he had said with a gentle smile, "promise me that I'll be the first to know when you're expecting." She had laughed, touched by his sincerity, and made the promise without hesitation. But now, the thought that she would never get to fulfill it gnawed at her, leaving her heart heavy with guilt. Her father had battled illness with courage for a year, but no amount of hospital visits or bedside hours felt like enough. Could she have done more? She couldn't help but ask. Her mother, as always, was quick to offer comfort. "Kelly, your father knew how much you loved him. He was proud of you." But the moment was interrupted by the sound of footsteps. Sharp and hurried. Kelly's sister, Julia Carter, entered the room with a man Kelly didn't recognize. He introduced himself as Scott Daniels, their father's attorney. Margaret gestured for him to take a seat, but Julia, with her typical impatience, urged him to begin. "Let's get on with it," she said briskly. Kelly. The tension between Kelly and Julia had only deepened during their father's illness. While Kelly had gone to great lengths to visit and care for him, Julia had remained distant, always citing her busy city life as an excuse. "It's not just the time, Kelly," Julia had argued once during a heated phone call. "Do you know how expensive it is to travel?" Kelly had countered. "It's a 5-hour drive." "Julia, this is Dad we're talking about." But her sister's priorities had clearly been elsewhere. As much as Kelly tried to repair the fragile threads of their relationship, they seemed to fray further wit. Now, sitting together in the same room, the atmosphere was fraught. Scott cleared his throat, producing a white envelope from his briefcase. "This is your father's will," he began. Kelly immediately recognized her father's handwriting on the envelope, and her chest tightened. Julia leaned forward, her impatience palpable. "Just read it already," she snapped. Margaret cast a disapproving glance at Julia, but said nothing. Scott opened the envelope and began to read, listing the contents of James's estate: the house, the land, some savings, and a storage shed. Kelly was taken aback. A storage shed? She couldn't recall her father ever mentioning it. Julia's expression soured immediately. "What about the cash?" she demanded. Scott explained that the savings, totaling $300,000, would be divided between Kelly and Julia, along with the storage shed. Julia's eyes lit up at the mention of the money. "I'll take the cash," she said without hesitation, her tone leaving no room for negotiation. Kelly felt a surge of frustration. "Why should you get all the cash?" she protested. But Julia was quick to retort. "Because I'm the eldest, and I need it more." The argument escalated, with Julia dismissing the shed as worthless. Kelly could see her sister's mind working, calculating the easiest path to securing the inheritance she deemed valuable. Margaret intervened gently, suggesting they agree to the division to avoid further conflict. Reluctantly, Kelly acquiesced, though the arrangement left her feeling cheated. Julia signed off on the deal with a self-satisfied smirk, her focus already shifting back to her life in the city. As the meeting concluded, Kelly couldn't shake a lingering sense of injustice. Her mother, sensing her unease, placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Give the shed a chance, Kelly. Margaret said softly. You never know what your father might have left behind for you. Despite her doubts, Kelly clung to that small spark of hope. The late afternoon sun cast a golden glow as Kelly walked along the quiet path leading to the shed. The field nearby, once lively with the hum of her father's farming tools, now stood eerily still. This was the place where James had spent countless hours, finding joy in simple tasks like tending to crops and repairing equipment. Kelly's emotions were a mix of nostalgia and apprehension. Her sister's dismissive attitude during the reading of the will echoed in her mind, and she couldn't help but feel a pang of resentment. Yet, her mother's words lingered. You never know what your father might have left behind. As Kelly approached the shed, she paused to take it all in. The structure was small and weathered, the wooden walls showing signs of years spent enduring harsh seasons. It wasn't much to look at, but to Kelly, it was a piece of her father's world, untouched since he had fallen ill. She hesitated for a moment before unlocking the rusty padlock and pushing open the creaky door. A wave of musty air greeted her, and her eyes adjusted to the dim interior. Inside, the shed was cluttered with old farming tools, shovels, rakes, and hoses, each bearing signs of wear and tear. Dust coated every surface, and cobwebs stretched across the beams overhead. Kelly took a deep breath, trying to stifle her disappointment. At first glance, it seemed there was little more than discarded remnants of her father's hobby. She picked up a gardening glove, worn and patched, and ran her fingers over the rough fabric. It felt as though her father's presence still lingered in this space, even if there was nothing overtly valuable to be found. But as she stepped further in, something caught her attention. The dimensions of the shed felt off, smaller on the inside than they appeared from the outside. Kelly's brow furrowed. She walked around, inspecting the walls and corners. That's when she noticed a faint seam in the back wall, partially concealed by a stack of old wooden crates. Her heart quickened. Could there be more to this place than met the eye? With newfound determination, Kelly moved the crates aside, uncovering what appeared to be a hidden door. It was sturdy, blending seamlessly with the wall, and would have been easy to overlook. Her father's love for surprises flashed in her mind. He had always been the kind of man who found joy in the unexpected, from elaborate birthday scavenger hunts to impromptu family adventures. This discovery felt like one of his surprises, meant just for her. Kelly searched the shed for a key, her excitement growing. After rummaging through an old toolbox, she found a small bundle of keys tied together with twine. Her hands trembled slightly as she inserted one into the lock on the hidden door. With a click, it swung open, revealing a small, secret room. In the center stood a safe, its metal surface cold and imposing in the dim light. Kelly's breath caught. What had her father left for her to find? Kelly's heart raced as she stared at the safe, its metallic surface a stark contrast to the rustic charm of the shed. Her father's meticulous nature hinted that whatever was inside had significant meaning. She knelt beside it, running her hand along its smooth surface, her mind swirling with possibilities. What secrets could it hold? Was it financial security, a personal letter, or perhaps something deeply sentimental? She didn't know, but the thought of uncovering another layer of her father's life filled her with a bittersweet excitement. The bundle of keys she had found earlier felt heavy in her hands as she searched for the one that might fit the safe. Each key told its own story, some worn and scratched, others pristine as if they had been seldom used. Finally, she found one that looked like it belonged. With a deep breath, she inserted the key and turned it. A satisfying click resonated through the room, followed by the slow creak of the door opening. Kelly's pulse quickened as she peered inside. The first thing she noticed was an envelope resting on top of what appeared to be a collection of items. Her father's handwriting adorned the front, simply addressed to her, Kelly. Tears threatened to spill as she delicately removed the letter and unfolded the paper within. She could almost hear her father's steady voice as she read his words. My dearest Kelly, if you are reading this, it means I'm no longer by your side. But know this, my love for you has always been boundless. Life is a way of teaching us lessons we don't anticipate. and this safe holds a few of mine. Each item here tells a story, some joyful, some bittersweet. I hope they remind you of the love, resilience, and determination that define our family. You've always had a way of seeing the beauty in life. Kelly, it's a quality I admired in you. Keep that light alive, even in the darkest moments. I know Julia and I had our differences, and I hope one day you can find a way to bridge the gap. Family is precious, and time is fleeting. With all my love, Dad. Kelly clutched the letter to her chest, her tears flowing freely now. Her father's words were a balm to her heart, easing the pain of his absence while amplifying the weight of his legacy. She folded the letter carefully and placed it aside before turning her attention to the other items in the safe. There were several velvet pouches, their soft texture suggesting something precious inside. As she opened the first one, she gasped. It was a collection of vintage watches, each one unique, meticulously crafted, and clearly cherished. Kelly remembered how her father had a quiet fascination with watches, often telling her how they symbolized the passage of time and the importance of using it wisely. Next to the pouches was a leather-bound journal. Kelly flipped through its pages, her breath catching as she recognized her father's handwriting. The journal was filled with musings, sketches, and plans for the farm. There were even entries about her and Julia, fond memories, advice, and dreams he had for their future. One entry read, "Kelly has always had a strong heart. I hope she never forgets how much she means to this family." Among the remaining items, she found an old photograph of her parents on their wedding day, their smiles radiant and full of hope. A pang of longing struck her heart, but it was accompanied by a deep sense of gratitude for the love they had shared. Finally, at the bottom of the safe, Kelly discovered a small box labeled for the future. She hesitated, wondering what significance it held. As she opened the box, a sense of awe washed over her. Inside was a deed to a small plot of land her father had quietly purchased years ago. The land was located in a nearby town, and a handwritten note attached read, "For Kelly's dreams. Build something beautiful." Overwhelmed by the depth of her father's thoughtfulness, Kelly sat back, letting the emotions wash over her. This wasn't just an inheritance, it was a message of love, encouragement, and hope from a man who had always believed in her. Kelly couldn't tear her eyes away from the deed and the handwritten note. Her father had always been a quiet man, but his gestures spoke volumes. This small plot of land wasn't just real estate. It was a tangible representation of his faith in her. He had believed in her ability to create something meaningful, even when she sometimes doubted herself. The weight of his trust filled her with both pride and a sense of responsibility. What could she build there? What dream could she bring to life? She carefully placed the deed back into the safe and locked it, knowing she needed time to process everything she had discovered. But as she exited the shed, her thoughts were interrupted by the memory of Julia's dismissive attitude during the inheritance discussion. Kelly felt a pang of sadness and frustration. Julia had treated their father's belongings as mere commodities, choosing the immediate gratification of cash over the sentimental and symbolic gifts their father had left behind. She wondered if Julia had truly understood the depth of their father's love. Back at her mother's house, Kelly shared the contents of the safe with her mom. As she laid the items out on the kitchen table, the watches, the journal, the photograph, and the deed, her mother's eyes filled with tears. "Your father always had a way of thinking ahead," her mother said softly, her voice tinged with emotion. "He knew what mattered most, and he always believed in you." Kelly. They spent hours poring over the journal together, reminiscing about the happier times their family had shared. Each page brought back memories. Her father teaching her how to ride a bike in the backyard, the nights they spent stargazing on the porch, and the way he would hum an old tune while working on the farm. But there were also entries that hinted at his worries, his concerns for Julia's materialistic tendencies, and his hope that she would one day find a deeper sense of purpose. "Your father loved you both, Kelly," her mother said, as if reading her thoughts. "Even when Julia made choices he didn't agree with, he never stopped hoping for the best for her. He just didn't always know how to show it. Kelly nodded, the truth of her mother's words sinking in. Despite their differences, her father had loved them unconditionally. Perhaps this inheritance was his way of guiding both of them toward what truly mattered. But how could she bridge the chasm that had grown between her and Julia? The thought lingered in her mind, unresolved. The next day, Kelly decided to take the watches to an appraiser to better understand their value. As she sat in the small, dimly lit shop, the appraiser marveled at the collection. "These are extraordinary," he said, carefully inspecting each piece. "Some of these watches are rare collector's items, worth a small fortune." Kelly was stunned. She had expected them to have sentimental value, but she hadn't realized the monetary worth. The appraiser estimated the collection's total value to be close to $500,000. It was a staggering amount, far more than the savings Julia had taken. As she walked out of the shop, Kelly felt a mix of emotions. The watches were priceless to her because of the memories they carried, but their monetary value presented a unique opportunity. She could sell some of them to fund the inheritance taxes and use the remaining proceeds to honor her father's dreams. Perhaps she could use the deeded land to create something that would serve her community, a garden, a sanctuary, or a small farm like the one her father had loved so much. When she returned home, Kelly shared her thoughts with her mother, who supported the idea wholeheartedly. "Your father would be so proud," her mother said, squeezing Kelly's hand. "He always believed in creating something lasting." But just as Kelly began to make plans, an unexpected knock at the door disrupted the evening. It was Julia. Her sister's expression was tense, her eyes darting nervously as she stepped into the house. Kelly's stomach sank. She hadn't seen Julia since the inheritance discussion, and she could sense that this visit wouldn't be simple. "I need to talk to you," Julia said, her voice clipped. Kelly gestured for her to sit, bracing herself for whatever was coming. Julia fidgeted, her hands trembling slightly as she avoided eye contact. "I heard about the watches," Julia finally said, her tone accusatory. "You knew they were valuable, didn't you? That's why you didn't fight me harder for the money." Kelly's initial shock gave way to frustration. "No, Julia, I didn't know their value. I only found out yesterday. And honestly, I would have been happy to share them with you if you had shown any interest in Dad's belongings. If you'd shown even a fraction of the care he put into leaving them for us." Julia scoffed, but her bravado wavered. I didn't think there was anything worth keeping in that shed." But now, her voice trailed off, and Kelly noticed the faint vulnerability in her sister's expression. "What is this really about, Julia?" Kelly asked gently. "It's not just about the watches, is it?" Julia hesitated, then looked away. "I made some bad financial decisions," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I spent the money from the inheritance, and now I'm in trouble. I didn't know where else to turn." Kelly felt a wave of anger and pity. She wanted to lash out, to remind Julia that their father had warned her about her reckless spending. But as she looked at her sister, once so confident, now visibly shaken, she felt the weight of her father's words in the letter. Family is precious, and time is fleeting. Maybe this was her chance to begin mending their relationship. Kelly took a deep breath, steadying herself. Her father's message resonated in her heart, urging her to act with compassion despite the frustration boiling beneath the surface. Julia, once the picture of confidence and self-assuredness, now sat before her a shadow of her former self. This was a side of her sister Kelly had never seen, raw, vulnerable, and desperate. "Julia," Kelly began, her voice calm but firm. "Dad believed in us. He believed we could rise above our mistakes and build something meaningful. That's why he left us these things, not just to fight over them, but to grow from them. You need to start taking responsibility for your actions." Julia flinched, her eyes welling up with tears. "I know I messed up, Kelly," she said, her voice cracking. I didn't know how else to fix things. I'm scared." Kelly's heart softened at the sight of her sister's rare display of humility. "We all make mistakes, Julia," she said, sitting down beside her. "But you can't keep running from them. You need to face this, and I'll help you." but only if you're willing to put in the work. Julia nodded, wiping her eyes. I don't know where to start, she admitted. We start by being honest. Kelly replied. You need to tell me everything about the debts, about what you've been dealing with. No more secrets. Over the next few hours, Julia opened up about the financial troubles she'd been hiding. Lavish vacations, luxury goods, and an overindulgent lifestyle had drained her resources, leaving her with mounting debts and nowhere to turn. Kelly listened patiently, feeling a mix of sympathy and frustration. It was a mess, but it wasn't unsalvageable. We'll figure it out, Kelly said when Julia had finished. But you need to understand that this isn't just about money. It's about changing how you live and how you think. Dad wouldn't want us to keep making the same mistakes. Julia nodded, a glimmer of gratitude in her eyes. Thank you, Kelly, she said quietly. I don't deserve your help, but I'll do whatever it takes to make things right. The days that followed were a whirlwind of plans and decisions. Kelly sold some of the watches, using the proceeds to cover the inheritance taxes and help Julia begin paying off her debts. It wasn't easy, but it felt right. The rest of the watches she kept, treasuring them as mementos of her father's wisdom and love. Kelly also began making plans for the land her father had left her. With her mother's encouragement, she decided to turn it into a community garden, a place where people could come together, reconnect with nature, and find solace. It was a project that felt deeply connected to her father's legacy, honoring his love for the earth and his belief in the power of community. The garden's creation brought a sense of purpose to Kelly's life. She poured her energy into it, enlisting the help of neighbors and friends to transform the plot of land into a vibrant, welcoming space. As the garden grew, so did Kelly's sense of fulfillment. She felt closer to her father than ever, as though each sprouting flower and ripening fruit carried a piece of his spirit. Julia, too, began to change. She took on part-time work to address her financial troubles and started spending more time with Kelly and their mother. Their relationship, once strained by years of resentment and misunderstanding, began to heal. Julia even joined Kelly in the garden, planting seeds and pulling weeds with a newfound sense of humility. One sunny afternoon, as Kelly and Julia worked side by side in the garden, Julia paused and looked at her sister. You know, I didn't think I'd ever feel this peaceful, she admitted. I've spent so much of my life chasing things that don't matter. But being here, with you, it feels different. It feels right. Kelly smiled, her heart swelling with gratitude. That's the magic of this place, she said. Dad knew what he was doing when he left it to us. He knew it could bring us back together. As the garden flourished, so did Kelly's family. The tensions of the past were replaced by a deeper understanding and appreciation for one another. Their father's legacy had not only provided them with material gifts, but had also given them the opportunity to rebuild their bonds and find new meaning in their lives. On the anniversary of their father's passing, Kelly, Julia, and their mother gathered in the garden to honor his memory, surrounded by blooming flowers and thriving plants. They shared stories, laughter, and tears. It was a moment of closure and renewal, a testament to the enduring power of love and family. In the end, Kelly realized that her father's greatest gift wasn't the watches, the journal, or even the land. It was the lesson that life's true treasures lie in the connections we build and the love we share. As she looked around the garden, at her family and the community they had created, Kelly knew she had found her place in the world, a place her father had always believed she would find. Thank you for watching this deeply moving story on Empathy Stories. Kelly's journey reminds us that life's greatest treasures are often hidden within challenges, waiting to be uncovered with love and determination. If this story resonated with you, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more inspiring tales. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Share your reflections in the comments below. Together, let's continue spreading empathy and kindness.